Welcome to The Trader, a Traitors podcast, a Spotify top 10 podcast. My name's Matthew. I'm a writer working in TV development, and I am a 100% faithful fan of the multi-award winning hit TV competition series, The Traitors. Most episodes of the podcast deep dive into individual episodes of the show from around the world, but every now and then, The Trader features interviews with contestants from the shows. In fact, you could go back and listen to interviews with cast members from UK seasons 1 and 2, US season 1, Australia 1 and 2, and The Traitors Canada. Today, though, I am continuing my coverage of The Traitors New Zealand season 2 with the first contestant interview. And what better interview to start with than an OG traitor? I am joined today by Mike. Mike, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Hey Matthew, very good to be here. It's finally nice to speak to you after listening to you prior to being on the show. So yeah, I'm doing really good, thanks.
I did. Did you get any tips from the podcast? Did it help or hinder you?
There was a lot to take in. I was trying to work my way through all the seasons on streaming, and I just Spotify. I searched the Traitors, and yours was the first that came up. So I spent several hours just trying to take what I could from it.
Good
I
to hear.
honestly can't remember. I can't remember what it was that I got from it, but it was enough to keep paying attention anyway.
It helped you get through 7 episodes. I'm going to take some credit for that. Now,
Absolutely.
I'm in London. It's 9 a.m. Where and when are you, Mike? What time is it where you are?
I'm in New Plymouth in New Zealand, and it is 8 p.m.
Okay, okay. So
I'm
it's
having a couple of beers, and I'm guessing you might be having a coffee.
I'm having a cup of tea.
Cup of tea.
Wake me up. I have lots of questions, mostly from me, but some from the Trader listeners. So we've got a lot to dive into. Before
Sure.
we get there, we're going to try and carry on the podcast tradition and play the Trader Traitor. Now, for listeners who are just joining us for this interview, the Trader Traitor is a game within a podcast about a game. The mission for Mike and I from here on in is to tell a lie to one another at some point during our chat. The lie has to be a fabrication, a made up fact. Could be big, could be small, could be about the traitors, could be about ourselves, could be about anything at all. For example, I could lie to Mike and say that it's the afternoon here, when actually, as I've just told you, really it's the morning. However, my lie couldn't be something like, "Oh, I didn't enjoy the outcome of the Traitors New Zealand," when actually I loved the outcome of the Traitors New Zealand. That would be me just faking an opinion. So we're not looking for fake thoughts and feelings. We're looking for outright lies, fake facts. Mike, are you ready to give it a go and try and betray me today?
Yeah. I guess you're going to be asking for some honest questions from me, and I guess I'm going to have to lie about at least one of them.
It's okay if you can tell me at the end what it's there's no worries, no worries. Uh, in that
All right.
case, we'll give it our best shot, and our game of the traitor begins now. It makes sense to start at the beginning. Now I know you can't talk too much about casting and the production process, but roughly, how did you end up being on the show? Like, why did you want to be on the Traitors?
So I'm not actually someone who watches a lot of reality television. So for everyone's that around me that has sees me on this, it was a lot. It was a big surprise. I I was working remotely in the middle of the North Island of New Zealand, and I didn't have very good internet access. And but one thing I did have was television. So we had Australia season one screening in New Zealand on TV. I'd never heard of the Traitors before. This is only in maybe March of this year. So I was like, well, I've got nothing else to do. I'll watch whatever this is. And so I started watching it, and I got really intrigued. I was like, this is an amazing show. I've never seen anything like it, and I really got into the whole thing. And then someone I was speaking to, I mentioned the show, the Australian one, to somebody, and they told me, oh, there's actually a New Zealand version of this. And I said, oh, really? I was quite surprised. So I Googled it, and the first thing that came up was apply now for New Zealand season two. So here I am over, working away, had nothing to do in the evenings. So I went, you know what? Why not? I've never applied for anything before. So I sat down for 10 minutes, filled out the application, sent away a 1 minute video about myself. Very relaxed. Not a lot of effort was put into it. Flicked it off to them, and I thought, well, that will be the last of that. And then production called me the next day and said, well, application's actually closed yesterday. That was the last day. They've been open for several months, but we like you, and we want to streamline you through the process. So several weeks later, I was appearing on the show.
Yeah, yeah. And did you know before filming then that it wouldn't be a sort of like celebrity cast like the first season and like sort of the US season?
I had absolutely no idea. I was being from New Zealand. I knew who probably 70% of the people that were on season one New Zealand. Um, it's a real, it's a small pool of
Yeah.
talent that they pick from. So I knew most of them. But as for casting for season two, I had absolutely no idea what was, who was going to be picked.
Yeah. See, I'm from Scotland, so Scotland and New Zealand have a very similar population size, so I relate to you there.
Yeah.
Now, in your interview with Paul in episode one, when he was chatting to everybody about, if they thought they might be a good traitor or a faithful, you made it pretty clear you wanted to be a traitor, and you referenced this. You said something that really caught my attention. This sort of political idea that an informed minority will always outsmart an uninformed majority. I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about that. Like, where did you come across this idea? Why did you want to be a traitor?
That is a quote that I'd heard several years ago, and I don't know what the source of that quote was, but it always stuck with me. That that's a really interesting way to look at things. We are sort of led by a minority who knows everything, and we know absolutely nothing, and that, but we can never get anything over them, right? So watching that show and seeing that, or the first time I ever watched it, it really made me think, oh, that's the position I would want to be in. And even in life, you want to be the one in the know. But as having spent my time on that show, I'm now looking at it from different perspectives. But I felt as though if I was to go in there and be a faithful, and this is no judgment or criticism of people as faithfuls, but to make it to the end, you need to either be naive, play naive. I mean, you really need to be sort of unconsequential to keep around. You have to be just in the background. And for me, I mean, I think I have an ego, like a lot of people have an ego. And I feel if I'm putting myself in this position, as a faithful, could I just sit there in the background and not really participate with the thought that I'm here to make it to the end. So I'm just going to just avoid anything. So for me, I was like, I don't think I can do that. I think I can be a traitor because I have control. So that was I went in there going, it's traitor or nothing.
Mhm.
And I made sure in my interviews and in all my preparation for it to say what I thought they needed to hear. And I felt 90% confident going in there that I would be chosen.
Yeah, yeah. And it worked out. It worked.
It did.
Based on your first impressions of the other players then, and those first days when you all get to meet, who were who did you get on with? Who were you drawn to immediately?
So I the funny thing is that one of the first people that I was drawn to that I met was actually Whitney. Um, I could tell that she was there to play the game from the first conversation I had with her in the entry area when we first walked into the manor for the first time, and just my semi-brief chat I had with her. I was like, oh, she's someone I want to stick close to, and I also feel like could be a threat later in the game. Um, yeah, honestly, there was 22 of us there to start with, so there was so many people, and everyone was. everybody was obviously putting their best foot forward. I thought everybody was great. And I mean, the only person that rubbed me up the wrong way was Mark, but I think that was just Mark being himself. He came up to me and said, well, asked me where I was from. I told him where I was from. He said, yeah, I've been there. I don't like it. And, that was his first, that's the first thing he said to me when he met me. And I just thought, oh, he's odd, but I knew that was just, his eccentricities that he has. And I just knew that's the way he was. But I mean, in those first couple of days, really, I think everyone's just worrying about themselves. Well, I would know I'm just worrying about myself, making, really make it may have been a failure on my behalf, but making close connections because I was so focused on becoming a trader, and also confident that I was going to be. That was sort of my train of thought, as opposed to making connections.
Yeah. And besides Whitney, was there anyone else that you thought might make a good traitor that you sort of wanted to be a traitor with?
Honestly, no. I mean, as I said, there was so many people to get to know. Even just trying to remember names for those first 2 days was a struggle. Noel, I liked from the get go. He and I had a bit more to do with each other than the edit showed. But I felt some sort of resonance with him. But yeah, as I said, there was so many people in such tight quarters. It was those first couple of days were tough just to get to know everyone on a 5 minute basis.
And when you were then chosen by Paul to be a traitor, I mean, how satisfying did that feel to feel that tap on the shoulder?
It was incredibly satisfying. I mean, I going into that first time in the round at the round table, um, I because I felt that it was going to happen. It was it wasn't like if I went in there feeling like, oh, there's no way they're going to pick me, I would have felt a lot more relaxed. It's like I knew I had this impending doom about to land on my shoulder, and in preparation for the pressure that I knew that was going to come from that, or the reveal, from after taking the blindfolds off. I was holding my thumb in my other hand, feeling for my pulse to try and focus on my heartbeat, and telling myself, "You want to be a trader. You want this. You want the tap on the shoulder." But just because I knew that just that I wanted it so badly that I felt this immense pressure. I don't know what it was. I It stressed me out how much I did want it. I think it was more like fear of not receiving it.
Mhm.
So there was a lot going on in my head at that time. And then, like the pulsating vein on my head, that's just when I'm hot. That's not even anything to do with anything else. Like if you look at me right now, it's probably I can feel it sticking out right now. It's funny that Jason clocked that, because that's just my head. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, it was a stressful experience.
Yeah. And when you then met your fellow traitors, Jane and Whitney, you
Mm.
uncloaked. Were you surprised at those choices? Had you suspected either of them?
As so, I I was so focused on just controlling myself
Mm,
from that round table through to the reveal that I didn't clock anyone or anything. I was just focused on trying to remain myself, or hey, the person that I'd only been for a few hours prior, because we haven't been together that long. But funnily enough, when we came into the conclave, they both pointed me out like, "Oh yeah, we knew, yeah, we guessed you." So they were apparently clocking. They'd both apparently clocked me, but I hadn't clocked anyone. I was like, "Hey, I'll worry about that when we're there. I don't need to try and clock. I just need to stay composed."
yeah. Now, we've got the first question from a listener. This is a question from Joe. Joe is a big fan of the show. Joe has also been on the podcast several times with me to co-host. And Joe asks, Who, other than Jackie, would you have recruited if you'd had the chance or if the decision was up to you? Who else do you think would have been a good option?
I definitely going in there thought that, well, not going in there. Once we were in there, I thought another male would
Mm,
be a good option just because process of elimination, if we manage to get rid of other female traders, they're going to go, well, there's going to be a male somewhere, right?
yeah, yeah.
So that was my line of thinking. So initially, I was thinking maybe Terry, uh, Noel, Noel, only because felt fond of him very early. But this is day one. We hadn't built a lot of relationships. Utah, I I felt like could be a good recruit at some stage. But yeah, I also felt that it's funny how we all agreed quite easily that recruiting someone who is likely to take themselves out quickly or, a sacrifice. I don't know if that was necessarily the right decision, but I think we all felt that there was only room for three in the conclave. So let's just, who's the most obvious fourth? I don't think any of us wanted Paul to bring us that option.
Hmm.
But he brought it to us. So we're like, hey, who's the first person that's going to have themselves removed? And that was Jackie.
Yeah.
So I was comfortable with that.
Okay. The other players commented on you being very quiet and reserved early in the game, and maybe you've kind of answered this because you said that you were just sort of focusing on, I guess nerves or just having been chosen as the traitor. I mean, is that just your personality, or were you doing what you had said earlier? Were you trying to be like a good faithful and just deliberately remain in the background? How much of that is just
But
you as a person and how much of it was deliberate?
a lot of that is just my personality. Like
Yeah.
in any group situation, group setting, I I will always first listen. I'm not there to contribute just to have my voice heard. Like I would rather listen and hear what people are talking about, and then contribute with something of
Mm.
value. But a lot of people have a strength that I don't, which is they can just talk, talk, talk. Right? They can just doesn't even matter if it has any value or anything. They can just keep going, and that puts people at ease. If people are able to do that. But I'm not that person. So going in there, I'm not. It's like people don't warm to me instantly. So, but if you put me in a room with all those people and you gave us a month together, I think they would all probably warm to me over 95% of the others. So, unfortunately, this isn't a format for that. So, I can only be who I am. But yeah, I rather listen rather than speak, and then just add value where it's needed.
Yeah. Did you think then, when other people started to comment and say, "Oh, Mike, you're really quiet," did you then think that was a problem? And did you think, "Oh, I should change now because they're talking about it"?
Absolutely not. I mean, people weren't really telling me that I was quiet. So
Okay.
what you see in the edit isn't really how it plays out. I mean, I actually wasn't as quiet as it may be perceived.
Okay.
Um, but there was a character that they had to create around me, right? So that's what you're seeing. But yeah, obviously a lot of it does. It went well with who I was, but I was more vocal than I wasn't just sitting there in silence and darting my eyes around the room, And there's a lot of clips of me just darting my eyes left and right and all over the show. Um, yeah, so there didn't seem to be much. Well, there was no direct conversation to me about, hey, you're really quiet.
Yeah. And the thing is, it obviously didn't make much of a difference anyway, because I think at the first round table, you didn't receive any votes anyway. So despite some people saying to one another, "Oh, he's so quiet, that's suspicious," it didn't really seem to actually amount to anything. So maybe it didn't
No,
really
well,
matter at all.
funnily enough, at the first round table, my name was brought up. It wasn't on the edit, and that was by Noel.
Mm,
And he brought up basically that he thought after we removed our blindfolds that I looked a bit red in the face, but he also sort of took that back straight away. So he goes, not verbatim at all, but he said something along the lines of, I noticed, Mike, you were quite red in the face. And then he said, oh, but actually I might have been red in the face. And I think we all, because it was really hot in here, and I think we all might have been. So, like, I'm thinking maybe it's not you, but I was sort of thinking that at the time. And then I just knew from probably listening to your podcast and other things, I knew to just sort of agree with it and go, oh, okay, yeah, I mean, yeah, it was hot. And then just stop and not get too defensive and let the conversation move on. And it did.
Yeah.
As soon as I went, oh, well, yeah, I can see that. And just a bit of agreement, he was just like, yeah, okay. And then everyone forgot about me. I was like, whew, that's over.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Noel seemed quite sort of diplomatic at all times, quite sort of level-headed and
Mm,
quite laid back.
yeah.
When Jackie was then banished and you voted for her, and you've kind of mentioned this a little bit. At what point did you decide you would vote for her? At the, was it at the round table just getting a sense of everyone else's intentions, or before you even went into the banishment room, had you decided tonight was the night we'll get Jackie out?
I mean, I wanted her gone from, as soon as possible. So I was glad that was going on. But prior to going in there, and it's just been released in the did you see? Oh, what is it? Deleted scenes that were released
No,
a couple of
no.
days ago. So a couple of days ago, there were deleted scenes released where Whitney pulled me and Jane in for a conversation about getting rid of Brittany. So that's prior to that round table where Whitney, Jane, and I all vote for Brittany. Um, so the only reason we went for that was just to, I guess, in agreement with Whitney. She was taking the lead at that time, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna go against her. That turned out to later on in the show be obvious that we were the only three that voted for Brittany on that night. But that was the night that Jackie was banished.
Yeah.
So then the two options were Molly and Jackie. And I mean, end of the day, we'd all planned to eventually get rid of Jackie.
Hmm.
So when it came down to that revote, I was sitting directly across the table from Whitney, and I was making eyes with her, and then eyes with her, then looking at Jackie, eyes with her, then looking at Jackie, and she gave me the look back that yes, we are taking out Jackie. Jane wasn't in anyone's eyesight, but she just went along with the same vote anyway. So we all were, yeah, we were all gunning for that.
So one of the sort of standout elements of the show and the way that it all unfolds is your switch on Whitney in episode 5. Uh,
Mm.
was this similar to Jackie? Did you know all along you kind of wanted to do this? Was it a last minute decision? How early on in your game plan did that come about?
On about day two, well, yeah, definitely on day two, I knew that I was thinking about the long game, and I didn't trust that I could go to the end with Whitney. So I knew in my own mind, I knew that I should be focused on a lot of other things. But if I don't trust my fellow trader from day one, day two, how, you know, how can I get to the end anyway, right? So I knew there had to be a plan put in place to get rid of her eventually. And I thought day 6, day 7, day 8 would be the day to get rid of her. But when there were, obviously after the challenge, the challenge where she could identify, I don't need to get into it. We all know what we're talking about. When she couldn't identify the organ, I thought, this is, even though this isn't evidence of a traitor, I knew that no one was going off evidence of a traitor. Everyone just wants something to grasp onto. There's nothing to grasp onto. No one's giving anything. So it's just, breathing wrong, drinking wrong, everything. Doing anything like that is enough to be banished, right? So watching her fake crying at banishments. Obviously, I know she's a traitor, and watching her crying when Jackie's going and all that, I thought, all right, clearly other people are spotting that, she's a little bit dramatic. We've got her supposedly being a undertaker slash whatever she is, everything. Apparently, jack of all trades at the funeral home. I thought what you don't see from that round table with me and Whitney is, I talk about, I feel like she might be into, theatre, things like that. Turns out she majored in theatre at university. So there were things like that, that I spoke about. But yeah, I knew it was several days too soon, but the window of opportunity arrived. I knew I was putting my neck way too far out there. I knew I was quiet, and here I am coming in really strong. But the only reason I came in really strong is because I did not want to spend the night with her at the conclave if I didn't pull it off, right? That would have been horrendous. So once, basically what happened, sorry, I'm skipping ahead and jumping back, but I knew that there were three other people that witnessed the challenge. I knew that Brittany was gunning for her. I actually approached Brittany to take the lead on all of this. So I didn't want to be the figurehead of this attack. I wanted Brittany to be doing this attack. And she got cold feet after I approached her, and she said, "You know what? I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can lead the charge. You have to do it." And by this point, I had already spoken to all these people. I'd already planted all these seeds, and I was like, well, if I don't bring this up, it's all going to come crashing down on me. So I just have to go, I've got to go all in on this. And yeah, hey, pulled it off, but I knew as soon as she walked out of that round table that my time there was potentially at risk for sure.
Yeah. And you kind of predicted the next thing that I was going to ask you about. You've already answered it, which was about the animal parts and Whitney not knowing what was what and how strange it was. And I was going to ask you that, as I suspected, you knew it wasn't really a very good reason for someone to be a traitor. In fact, it didn't have anything to do
Absolutely.
with the game at all.
Had
But
nothing.
I guess you just realized that other people would latch onto that and that they would just
Mhm.
pick up on anything. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Well, I
yeah,
mean, up to that point, they were latching on to, you know, I mean, from watching any season of this show, when it's really early, there's nothing to go by, and it's a
yeah,
little bit
yeah.
of a like, do I like you or do I not? Really early on, and then it's just like anything that seems odd, it's like, well, if they're potentially lying about this, well, then they might have come in here, sort of my strategy, and that was, hey, I feel like she came in here to not only be a traitor, but she was so confident in herself that she's going to lie about who she is. She just wanted to be like a super traitor and just lie about absolutely everything she could. And now she's cooked it and we figured her out. So there was nothing else floating around. So why not jump on it?
Yeah, yeah, sure. And one of the big shocks involved with this whole episode, I guess, is that Jane didn't seem to have any idea what was going on. She didn't know why did you not get her involved in it?
I just
Was
didn't
it
have the
just too
time.
risky?
It was too risky and I didn't have the time. But it might seem that we have a lot of time, but we really don't. Like the days are busy, and then we can only communicate when we're allowed to communicate. So even just talking to my fellow mission participants, Mark, Molly, and Bailey, that witnessed Whitney, right, and then talking to Brittany, just talking to four people independently was hard work to try and over one day. And that might seem crazy, but they just that time doesn't exist. So also then trying to convince Jane without Jane potentially taking it back to Whitney, it just wasn't possible.
Yeah.
And the lie that I had for Jane, I didn't even have that prepared until, conclave.
Yeah.
I had to think of something. As I said, I didn't intend to be the lead in that. I intended for Brittany to be the lead, and then just whatever happened after that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said that you, after Whitney's banishment, you kind of thought, oh, this might be bad news for me. When your banishment ends up happening, then did you go into the round table thinking this is it for me, I'm done, or did you have hope that maybe you could bring it back around?
Which one? Sorry, my
Uh,
banishment.
you're banished. Yeah, when you actually were then banished, which I think is like episode 7, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, episode 7. So that day, although the night before the banishment before, the only person who voted for me was Bailey. So was that the night? Was there a day between those? Um, yeah, there was. Oh, that was Stephen's banishment. Yeah, so Bailey voted for me, and I felt like that was quite surprising that it was only her that voted for me
Mm.
from the bits and pieces that were brought to the round table. So when I got up in the morning, I was like, hey, I mean, every day is just a bonus at this point. As I said, I didn't mean to do anything so dramatic so early. So it felt like, every day is a bonus. But the day of my banishment, I did feel an eerie vibe around me. I felt that people weren't really willing to talk to me too much. They weren't really trusting me. And that's obviously what led to me trying to make such an extreme statement after the mission to try
Yeah.
and confuse and potentially look more like someone like Mark who just does crazy things than, just a bad faith. Trying to look like a bad faithful rather than a traitor. Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the questions that have been sent as well, is about that very thing. So Matthew, not me, a different Matthew asks, why did you want to explicitly say in episode 7 that you hadn't taken the temptation of a shield? And he's
Mm-hmm.
kind of got a second part to this question. He asks, and why do players find going for a shield so suspicious in this game anyway? Like it seems to bother people when someone actively wants a shield.
I know. So from episode 2, when Terry and Utah, when we are in the minefield,
Hmm.
Terry and Utah went for a shield. And that night, Terry got banished.
Yeah.
So clearly, to me, from the first real mission, um, Terry going for a shield did not make people think that, that meant he was faithful. And it seemed to go to be a bit of a pattern of that, like going for a shield doesn't work, right? It's that we've all watched enough seasons now that people don't trust that. So the the mountain climb mission that we did when Paul offers us a shield, I was trying to figure it out both times. I did 2 trips, just like me, Ben, Utah, and Sally were the 4 that did 2 trips. And the whole journey, I'm thinking, do I get one? Do I not get one? How can I swing this? And after climbing the mountain, going down and climbing back up the mountain 2 times, I went, I'm going to do the opposite, and I'm going to say that I don't have one because I know I'm up for banishment tonight. I know that saying I've got a shield is not going to. It's just going to be a lazy way to try and get out of being banished. And I know that no traitor has probably ever said that they explicitly didn't go for a shield or they don't have a shield. So let's just try something completely new and look like a crazy person. Because what else can I do at this point?
Yeah. I'm
And that
sort
was
of
the
jumping.
only time that I knew that I would have everyone's ears prior to going into.
Sure.
And yeah, it was I knew it was risky, but I had to do something. And it didn't work out, but hey, at least I tried.
Yeah. I have another question from Joe, who again is a super fan of the show and has been on the podcast many times. I'm going back a little bit here. Joe says, if you had known Jane was a former like police officer, Would that have changed how you played the game with her? Would you have been a bit more wary if you'd known Jane's background?
It wouldn't have it all. I mean, Jane was just lovely, nice, fine, not really threatening. And she proved that actually. She never went behind my back. Um, and yeah, she was solid. I mean, going day two, day three, I wasn't so certain about her, but sort of the time of Whitney going and there and beyond, I was pretty comfortable with Jane, and I was actually in the mindset of I'd be quite happy to go to the end with her. And yeah, whatever her profession was meant nothing would have meant nothing to me.
Okay. So the main thing then that seemed to lead to your banishment was your shift in demeanor, as others described it. They thought you'd gone from being very quiet to suddenly being very vocal. Do you do you agree that maybe that's the thing? Did your behavior change too much? How do you feel looking back on it now?
Hindsight's a real bitch, isn't it? I mean, you can watch it back and go, "Oh, I could have done this. I could have done that. I didn't need to worry about that person. I didn't need to worry about this." I mean, we've all got our own narrative going on in our heads. We're just creating a story in our own brain. We know nothing else, right? But to answer your question, I'm not actually that quiet. Um, and the, I guess, yeah, it was just that one round table with Whitney, which was just like polar opposite, I guess, because it was quite an aggressive attack on her. But as I said, it was a desperation attack. I mean, I did not want to be spending the night with her in Conclave. Um, and I mean, I sort of sunk back into really, I did sink back to exactly what I was prior to that. But I guess people were more interested in my opinion. So there was more to share, right? Yeah, had I not have gone for her and had I just stayed behind and waited for her to come for me, I probably would have lasted to maybe episode 10 or 11, maybe. But honestly, it was because of the experience that I'll probably only ever do once. I mean, I'm not a person who works in entertainment. I would rather really participate in the drama
Yeah.
than just go to the end for 70 grand and do nothing. So, yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah. And after your banishment, then obviously you leave the game, so you don't know beyond that what ends up happening. It
Not at
must
all.
have been strange, I guess, maybe watching it on TV, watching episode 8 on and seeing all this stuff happen that
Mm.
you had no idea about. And again, maybe you can't really tell us whether or not you knew the outcome, but how was it watching the rest of the season that you didn't participate in?
Yeah, I didn't know anything. The only thing I knew was that I saw Mark on the same flight as me the next morning. And I knew, I was like, well, okay. I said, what are you doing here? And he said, I can't tell you. And I said, I respect that. You know, Mark plays the game by the rules. And I was like, you would have had to be black, but you would have had to decline blackmail. I'm like, how does it, what? You know, I thought that was the craziest thing. So I was so, that was the biggest thing I was anticipating is actually seeing how it unraveled. And I still can't believe that he didn't choose to carry on and at least try his luck as a traitor. You know, like it would have been amazing to see him actually do something with them and
Yeah.
take Jane. You know, he could have taken Jane out. He could have stayed in. He could have gone all the way. You just never know. So I was, you know, there's a lot of praise around Mark's decision to do that, but I was just so disappointed. It was just like, well, you've been you've been just crazy person this whole way through, and then just to end it was just wild. But um, yeah, obviously seeing who got recruited after was always interesting to me, and to see yeah how people would cope as a traitor because it is a difficult job. I mean, it's just you're playing it from two sides. You're yeah. I mean, it's obviously living a lie, and it's easy to think from the outside. Well, it's just a game, just lie. But um, telling the truth is a lot easier than it is to lie. So it was great to see. It was great to see Ciali do it, Ben do it, obviously Bailey do it, and yeah, Bailey done a great job. And you know, that's probably my biggest thing. Like, my biggest takeaway from it is I do think building that rapport as a faithful. Also, there's moments where people actually prove themselves as faithfuls based on certain decisions that are made.
Hmm.
There is actual, proof. Oh, you are a faithful. So I think may have been a moment where she did prove herself. So then, then you've only got 4 days as a trader. It's probably
Yeah.
quite a bit easier. So that might have been a better strategy to go in as a faithful and be approachable as to be recruited. Um, but yeah, it was pretty cool, and I was quite happy for Jace to come out of his shell later on. And
Yeah.
but Joe just didn't want to listen to him. Yeah.
If there was one thing then that you said, hindsight is an amazing thing. If there's one thing you could go back and change in the game, Mike, what one thing might you do differently?
The one thing I'd do differently is probably not take Whitney out, even though I had my opportunity. And I was awake. Well, I didn't even sleep that night planning that. Um, and I wasn't going to do it. I was telling myself, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And then when we got to breakfast in the morning, I was like, all right, I'm doing it. That's what I wouldn't have done. I would have at least waited a few more days
Yeah.
and risked her doing it on me eventually.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've hinted at this a little bit, but when you see the finished edited episodes as they air on TV, is there anything you thought, oh, they've left this out, they've missed this, I wish viewers had seen some other event happen? Is there anything we didn't get to see that you wish we had seen?
That's a good question. I do feel as I was watching it, there were a lot of things. Um, but nothing too dramatic. I mean, I have to hand it to production. They did a pretty good job. Oh, not a pretty good job. They did an excellent job of really capturing the essence of what happened. Obviously, there's only so much they can fit into however many minutes an episode. Um, there's a lot at round tables that didn't make the cut,
Hmm.
but nothing that would have really changed the storyline too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how's life been since the show has been on TV? Does anyone recognize you? How's it all going?
No one where I'm from cares. I mean, obviously, people have become aware of it, but honestly, the most messages and things I get are from abroad, are from
Yeah,
Europe and Australia and US sort of thing. No one around here really gives a shit. So
yeah.
that's typical of New Zealand. Yeah,
Well, I'm glad that we're all watching. So many people in the UK are accessing the show and listening to the podcast. It's funny when Traitors Australia was on, it was really similar. A lot of the contestants said we're getting all of these messages from people in the UK and in the States. I
mm,
guess the show. I mean, so I'm in the UK, and the UK Traitors is just huge. It's just become this absolute
mm.
smash hit TV show. So viewers here are trying to get any other version of the show they can. So they will.
Well, my work colleague has had a woman from the UK staying with him, just visiting, and he doesn't think anything of it, but she just thinks it's amazing that he knows someone who's on the Traitors, right? And she was watching it while she was there, and she was just blown away. And he's like, "Oh yeah, well, whatever."
Yeah. That's just Mike. Now, we are almost at the end of our chat, Mike, and before we get to the reveal of the game that we've been playing, maybe you could help these fans in the UK and elsewhere find you. Where are you on social media? How can we follow you?
I'm only on Instagram. I didn't have social media until I was on this TV show. Mike Adams, and then I think there's four underscores after it because it's a pretty common name. So
Okay.
yeah, you could probably find me there.
Yeah. I will link you on the episode description and people can find you through the podcast social media as well. Now,
Fantastic.
Mike, we've given it a go. We've been trying to play the trader traitor. Did you tell me any lies?
I tried. I tried to lie, but I
Okay.
honestly couldn't get one in there. I couldn't do it. I know that this whole thing is based around me going on a show to tell a lie, but I was just trying to answer every question as honest as I could, and every time I tried to think of something, I was like, "Well, it doesn't make any sense." So no, I didn't manage to squeeze any lies in.
Okay. Unless this is your lie. Unless you're pretending that you didn't lie. And actually you lied like about 10 things. Does that mean that the list of all these I've written about six different things down that I thought you were lying about. You tell me that they're all actually true.
Everything is 100% true.
Okay. I will
What did
confess
you
then
think?
that
What did you think? What did you think was the most
I thought
likely to be a lie?
maybe you seen Mark on the plane. That could have been a lie. I
Mm.
thought that you said that Traitors New Zealand have released some deleted scenes. I thought, hey, you
Yeah,
could have made that up. I didn't know that.
no. You obviously don't
Uh,
follow my Instagram.
I know I need to pay closer attention. Uh, I thought that maybe something about your application story was fake, that you applied late and they called you back and
I
who
know I
knows.
could have lied anywhere, but I couldn't do it. You're just too much kind gentleman. I couldn't do it to you.
I actually did tell you a lie. Do you have any idea what I may have lied to you about?
Oh, well, because I tried to listen in, but you were mostly asking questions. So can you give me a hint?
No. Not giving you a hint.
Well, this game's a flop because I can't think of it.
Okay, I will tell you what I lied to you about.
Yeah.
It's a bit sneaky. I did have questions from listeners, and
Your
one of
lies
the
are
questions,
sneaky every week.
a listener called Michael did send a question in, but it's kind of about something that happened beyond your time in the show. So, Michael, if you're listening, I haven't forgotten your question. I will ask your question to another contestant, but I didn't really think it would work with Mike. I lied and said that somebody called Matthew sent in a question, and they said, "Oh, it's not me." But actually, it was me. It was just me. I just asked a question and pretended I was
You
someone
know what's
else.
funny? When you said that, I thought, why would you even? I thought it was funny that you said that, but I didn't think that was your lie. No. So congratulations, you win the game.
Yeah, thank you. So to be fair, listeners, I did not give Mike much warning about it, so I kind of sprung it upon him. So you know,
But
I
it's good because you usually lose every week, so it's good to have a win.
I'm usually terrible at it. So yeah, it's nice. Listeners, you can find the podcast all over social media. We are on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at the Trader Podcast, and on X at the Trader Pod. You can also email me by sending a message to the Trader Podcast at gmail.com. It's great if you can leave reviews or you can follow and subscribe wherever you're listening: iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Castbox, whatever it is. You could send me questions for other contestants coming on the show. You could send me thoughts on the episodes. I want to say a quick thank you here to Jordan, aka Nutmeg House Bear, who sent in a nice donation on the coffee page. The link to that is in the episode description. It's ko-fi.com/Matthew Keeley, in case you want to chip in and help as a one-off payment. You know, that costs me some money to run the podcast. So if you feel like it and you're able to, that would be lovely. The last thing for me to say just is thank you to Mike. Thanks so much. You've given us such good insights into your gameplay and how the show was from your perspective. The listeners of the podcast will really love to hear this. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me, and I hope that I gave you all that you needed. So no, it's awesome. Thank you, Matthew.
You gave me more than enough. Thank you so much. I'll
Great,
talk to you soon, Mike. Bye bye.
Matthew. Bye.